Welcome to Only One You Need Radio. We're not the only one you need. You are. We just show you how to get out of your own way. With your host, speaker, author, business coach, and consultant, David Dubé.
Welcome to Only One You Need Radio. It's your host, David Dubé. Super excited to have you here with me today. In this episode, my friend, we're going to talk more about communication hurdles and how to resolve them or remove those communication hurdles. So when you're having disappointment in the areas of communication and it's because there's maybe something else going on with that individual, what the purpose here is to help you find out what that is and remove the distraction from the communication so you can actually get focused communication, which equates to effective communication. And in doing so, in this episode, I want to talk about two specific kind of things when it comes to this type of communication. The first is going to be distracted communication. Distracted being maybe they're doing dishes when you're having conversation, or maybe it's you even doing dishes while having conversation, or it's they're on the phone and they're trying to have a conversation with you. Obviously, that does not work. You can't carry on two partial conversations and be very effective at it. The other part too is when you maybe begin to bring something up to someone, they then find themselves trying to come up with an excuse to get out of it, a way to get out of it. Like I have a phone call to make, or they answer their phone when it's just not important. What should be important is what's going on between you and them at the time, as opposed to creating some new distraction, new disturbance that draws them or you even away from the communication. Now, I've found this to be something that I used to do. I remember one of my first girlfriends and we were having an argument. And I remember sitting like halfway on the chair and I wasn't looking at her. I was like, my body was facing away from her and I'm kind of rotating my head to partially face her as I was talking to her. And I thought to myself during that time, I was like, if this isn't a more effective way to tell her I'm not interested in communicating with her, I don't know what is. But I remember thinking at the same time, like, this is just really not the right way to have a good conversation. And so I turned myself around and faced her directly and was able to have a much more effective conversation with her. But I remember thinking that, like, I just don't want to have this conversation. And then paying attention to what my body was doing the entire time, going, okay, I'm really not in this, but I really should be. And then rearranging myself to actually be more effective in communicating with her at that time. We do this all the time. And oftentimes it's subconscious. Like, we do distractions because we don't want to fully be present in the conversation for several reasons. A, we think we're going to lose the conversation or we're going to lose the argument. B, we don't want it to resolve. So oftentimes, if you're in a relationship that's just not going where you want it to or where you think it should be going, or you already know that the relationship should have ended already, but you don't want that answer to come out yet, you will continually distract yourself from saying the words you know you should say to break the relationship off. And so you will avoid it by like answering a phone call, starting a text message string with someone, or you'll make up some excuse as to why you can't have that conversation then. We're all guilty of it. This is not something that's brand new. This is something that we all do. But when you're aware of it, the interesting thing is we often know our own answers and our own truths, but we avoid them at all costs. We are afraid of hurting other people, so we avoid even our own truth and what we know is right and what we really should do constantly. This is one of the places where you'll find most people are guilty of doing these exact same things. We create our own partial distractions because we don't want to be fully present into the argument or what may be considered an argument when all it is a conversation that one should actually have. Because once you get through that process, once you break through that, the barrier of I don't want to have this, not only do you have the most effective form of communication at that point in time, but you can actually come to a resolution quickly, easily, and both be happy sooner as opposed to being angry in the moment and letting that fester and carry on. And then it cycles itself. It does it again and again and again. And we know this. All of us are guilty of this, and we all know what I'm talking about because it happens again and again and again. Even though we have the answer and we know this is what we should do to end everything or to come to the conclusion of this argument or the communications that we're having, for whatever reason, we fear it more than anything else, and we will come up with excuses not to face it. So the idea here is that you'll get to it quicker by understanding this is what we're actually doing. So pay attention to yourself, pay attention to them. And the best part about it is, especially when it's someone else doing it and you see them starting to pick up their phone or do something different, you can call them out on it. You can say, I get it. You probably don't want to have this conversation right now. I don't either. But at the same time, don't you want to be happy? Or at least happier than right now? Because I do, and I want you to be happier than right now as well. And the only way I see that happening is if you and I have an open dialogue right now and pay close attention to what each of us has to say so we can come up with a resolution here right now together. How's that sound? So you can bring it to a closure, you can at least bring it to a head, and then find closure a lot easier by being aware that this is actually what's going on. So when someone becomes distracted, they become distracted because they don't want finality to happen. Oftentimes, they fear it, even though they know it's what needs to happen. We do this all the time. It blows my mind. It really, really, really does. Now, all of this leads to another set. And what is that? That's changing of subjects or bringing up old arguments. And what they want to do is they want to bring attention off of the current subject line and bring it to somewhere else. They want to point out something else that oftentimes has nothing to do with the current subject at hand, but it's also the same thing is true. What they're throwing out objections essentially that have nothing to do with the current conversation, all because they're afraid of it coming to a head again. So why not bring a different hurdle that may have nothing to do with the current one in order to not only confuse you of what you're really talking about, but also to make the point either about them or on something else altogether. Now, we're all probably guilty of this one as well. I'd be remiss if not everyone was guilty of this one as well. But the idea is essentially the same. It's the avoidance of the real truth and also the avoidance of having or coming up with a solution or an answer to a current problem that is being discussed or talked about. So by pointing that out, you can get back to the real subject at hand. And some of the best ways to do this is to write down and see, if you use your phone, it becomes another distracting technique. You need to write it down like on a sheet of paper or in your journal and have that with you so you can reference the reason why you're there to have that conversation in the first place. And you can go back to it again and again and again. So when someone's trying to change the subject on you, you can say, actually, we're actually here to talk about this, or this is the real reason, why we're here to talk right now. And so you can also, in doing that and bringing that pen and that paper, you can say, hey, I get that that's an issue, but let's write that down and come back to that, because we can talk about that later. But the real reason we need to have this conversation is because of XYZ right now. We can go back and revisit ABC later, but we're here for XYZ. And so it enables you to release the tension on whatever the old argument or the change of subject is by writing it down. So then you don't forget it, they don't forget it. And it's once again down on a sheet of paper that you can reference later. But both of these are good solutions for being distracted or bringing up distracting arguments to what the main topic that's being talked about or discussed needs to be. I hope that this helps you, that this is something that you begin to use and utilize. If so, I'd love to get your feedback. If you're not already, make sure on iTunes that you're subscribed and leave feedback. I'd love it if you rated the channel. If you're on YouTube listening to this on there, make sure you subscribe and get notified for all the new content that's coming out. And leave any comments. Share with me what you would like to hear. Find me on the social networks. Connect with me. Let me know that you found me because of the podcast. I'd appreciate it so very much. I'm David Dubé with Only One You Need Radio. It's time that you be the person you're meant to be. Believe in all that you're capable of and become more than you thought imaginable. I look forward to catching you on the next episode. Take care.